Absolutely cool. I got it at 5 past, so we'll kick things off. So yeah, quick welcome to our webinar. I think this is number 5 now of our series of 8, which if you haven't joined us before, it's really focusing towards focusing towards candidates out there, you know, people are applying for jobs. And I think what we've touched on in previous webinars is there's a lot of people out there at the moment who weren't planning to be searching for a job, but due to this this nasty bug we've got, suddenly find themselves in the marketplace. So I think the idea around our webinars is really to reach out to those who haven't been on the job market for a while, or for those who have been active on the job market, just a few kind of hints and tips to go along the way. Because I guess what you'll find in the current climate is we've now got a client's market. So there's lots of applications for each job, where pre-COVID it was always been the other way around within hospitality. So yeah, welcome to our webinar. A bit of admin just to kick things off really. So we always try and keep our webinars down to an hour. It is more of just a discussion, a chat really, than a lecture of how to do things and what we think's best. But hopefully with the guests we got today, we'll have different viewpoints and different ideas and some kind of life experiences as well, both from themselves as a candidate, as well as them as a recruiter or as an employer who are employing, you know, numerous people week in, week out. So what we'll do, we'll quickly go through our guests today, and then the discussion today is really about making sure you're being as flexible and available to the employer as possible. If you're applying for jobs through a recruiter or even via a recruitment agency, what the best practice is really as a job seeker. I'm really kind of optimizing the most out of a process, you know, getting kind of interview feedback, so making sure you got references to hand, etc. So we're going to run through that. As always, we'll kind of finish off with a couple of things. We'll look at the job market and update you of some positivity. I think we're slowly seeing, I hate to use the phrase green shoots, but you know, the market is slowly waking up now. And as always, what we try not to do is interrupt the webinar with questions, but we'll try and answer as many questions at the end as possible. And if we can't, we will come back to you directly with an answer, hopefully, to your questions. So first off, if we can, yeah, just introduce ourselves, guys. So sorry, I should have started. We did have Paul Allen from Olive Catering join us today, but sadly had something come up this morning which has made him unavailable. So he apologises and sends his apologies for not being with us. Hopefully we can get him on at a later week. So Graham, if you'd like to kick us off, tell us a bit more about yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you very much again for the invite. So I'm Graham Cook. I'm CEO of All Star Lanes. We have boutique bowling, cocktail bars, beautiful restaurants across central London. I've been with the business, gosh, nearly 4.5 years now.
Fantastic. And what do you do on a day-to-day basis? How big is the organisation? So I think some people have come across the brand, but yeah, how big is it? You know, headcount, etc.
Yeah, sure. We're circa 300, 350. We swell in traditionally our busiest time of year is Christmas time and building up towards Christmas from September. Certainly hopeful that we start to see that coming through in the coming weeks. So yeah, circa 300, 350. And
Boris has finally allowed you to open.
Yes, we had a little bit of a false start, which was extremely cruel. We got extremely excited, got everyone back in for the 1st of August, and then we got just under 12 hours notice of that one. So thanks, Boris.
I think I was watching the news or listening on the radio on a Sunday night. I think, was it a Sunday night, the announcement? And we knew we had Graham coming on our first webinar. And it was no kind of surprise when he politely dropped us a message saying, my diary's just completely thrown out the window for next week because we can't open, which is fully understandable. So thanks for sparing time again to join us, Graham. Really appreciated. And Adrian, I know you've kind of introduced yourself the last couple of weeks, but tell us a bit more about you and probably your industry background before you joined Talent Hive.
Okay. Yeah, for those that are new to the webinars. So I'm Adrian. I've been involved for 5 years in recruitment. Prior to that, 15 years working in hotels, all Midlands based. So I began at the Belfry, which was De Vere at the time, the golf resort, and then moved to Q Hotels in 2005. Spent 10 years with those guys. So working from HOD level up to operations management, and then change of pace. And I've been with Will for 5 years now. So recruiting for the sector that I know and love.
What niche have you fallen into, Aid? What do you recruit for us?
All sorts. Mainly hotels. Mainly hotels. I do some student accommodation, some retirement villages, anything really, private houses, anything that's got a link to hospitality, and I can use my contacts and to help place people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I spoke to a client earlier today, and it's quite good that we've got quite a diverse portfolio of clients, because everyone just presumes we just do hotels and restaurants. But I think we're going to touch this on later on in the webinar when we talk about the job market. But our industry is so vast and wide. There's so many opportunities out there. So I think when we speak to job seekers out there, instead of just kind of looking at your typical roles you look at, if you're an F&B manager in a hotel, look further afield. There's so many sectors within this industry you can look at. Some are recruiting at the moment, so maybe diversify what you're looking at. So what I want to do is start off today with a poll, and we have already touched on this poll. Well, this subject regards in other webinars, but I think it's really important just to see how many people on here during their interview process and how they kind of conduct themselves, how many people really kind of press home to get interview feedback. So not CV feedback, but particularly once you've gone and invested the time, energy and resources to go for an interview, how many of you actually invest the time to go and chase feedback on your interview, successful or not? Or when you hear a no, is it just that's the end of it, we'll move on? So if I just launch a poll, I just want to find out how many people either always do it, occasionally do it, and never do it. So I'll just launch that now. And we'll leave that running in the background for 5 minutes. So today's all about how to conduct yourself. And I think it starts from anything from what we've talked about in previous webinars in terms of mapping out who you should apply for, sectors. And I just touched on it there in terms of looking at different sectors, where your skill set might work. But all the way through to, for me as a frustration as a recruiter, is for a candidate who's going to help me drive the process forward and work with me to secure that dream job. Anything from making themselves available for interview to making sure they're fully prepped and fully aware of it, really. So I guess we'll talk about the subject I've just launched in the poll, actually, and I'll fire this at you, Graham. If a candidate was to chase you for feedback, would you volunteer to give interview feedback? Is that something you do already in your process, or do you just welcome people to ask for it?
No, we do, as a standard, we do offer feedback. We do appreciate that it's part of a candidate's ongoing journey. It also says an awful lot about us as an employer. We are very aware it's a very small world, and our the reputation that we carry as a place to work is as important to us as our reputation as a place to come and enjoy as a guest. So feedback is offered religiously.
Yeah, it's quite a good point, actually, because I always talk about kind of brand awareness when you're an employer. Please don't give candidates a bad experience because they won't apply for your jobs. But I always forget you're actually a brand that you're selling to, your B2C, to, business to customers. And actually you should think about the brand awareness as a whole, really. So,
we know from the number of people in our bars in particular that were guests before they came and applied for roles here that, they are absolutely the same group of people. So
yeah.
To have a bad rep as a place that doesn't treat candidates terribly well wouldn't really work for us.
And a bad reputation will spread quicker than a good reputation. That's a frustrating thing.
100%.
Yeah. What about you as a recruiter, Ray? How do you find trying to get feedback for candidates?
I think it's easier for a recruiter to obtain feedback from a partner than sometimes. I think it depends what company you're applying for. But do you use ATS systems, Graham, or because I think you find that sometimes in the big organisations where, it goes through the system, you get invited to interview, the interviewer will then just feedback to say, not successful, and then you put in the system and it comes back not successful. And I think that's where, a lot of people kind of then lose that feedback. Whereas, as a recruiter, we have that we are having the communication with the hiring managers. So 9 times out of 10, we will get detailed feedback.
Yeah. Hands down, 100%. It's always, as a client, it's easy to be very candid and to be very open with a recruitment agent. And equally, you're engaging with a recruitment agent for a set period of time with the goal of hoping to get someone as quickly as possible. So we learn more about what we're looking for as we meet people, and equally the recruiter learns more about exactly what we're looking for, so yes, I would agree with that. We do use an ATS, but alongside that we have an interview evaluation matrix that really scores candidates on that particular role, and that's the level of feedback we'd be willing to offer.
And it shows that you're from a HR background, Graham, which is always important because you see value in it. And it's probably one of my, it's getting a lot better these days, but I've been recruiting for 15 years now, and it's always been my pet frustration that, the feedback you get is, they're not the right fit, or we're looking for something else, or they're overqualified, or it's not enough. It doesn't give the candidate enough material to move forward and either change what they're applying for, or making sure they're highlighting certain skills within interviews next. And that's what we're on to.
And no feedback is it's shameful, and I remember prior to coming to All Star, I took a period of time out. I did some consultancy work. But when I was looking to start working full time, I had more time than I would have had if I was applying for jobs in lunch hour and trying to get over for interviews and things. So I think, and I really embraced that as a positive, because to actually take the time to sit back and look at really what you want to do next is really, really important. So then you put automatically more thought into preparing for an interview, and only really going and applying for things that you absolutely set your heart on. So to just get absolutely stone silence is just terrible. And no names mentioned, but I went through 6 interviews, wrote a business plan for an employer at the same time as going through the process with All Star. To this day, I haven't heard what they thought of what I've written,
It's sending out a signal right now.
It's really...
Especially, just spending an hour on your lunch break or traveling somewhere for an interview. But if you've gone through 6 stages with a presentation and a business plan, it's...
Yeah. And they were so prescriptive. I had to visit 8 of their venues, including a hotel. I had to eat here, go there. An awful lot of pre-work put in, and then, nothing. It's shocking.
It's just rude. It really is. Yeah, it really is. So, just to wrap up on our poll then. So 44% have always asked for interview feedback, 31% occasionally, and 25% never. So hopefully from this, that 25% who have never kind of followed up might see value in doing so and see it as an extra skill, especially in the current climate. So I'll just end that poll and finish that up. And I think I can publish the results, share results. There we go. So we just touched on it there, actually. And you spoke about 6 interviews, business plans, etc. What's your experience as an employer when you're trying to get people in for interview? How flexible do you need to be as an employer in terms of your availability, locations, etc., and timescales? But what do you expect from a candidate?
Okay, traditionally we're flexible in terms of timing. I'm lucky. Myself and most of the senior team, we're quite early birds. So, we appreciate people aren't at their best if they're looking at their watch because they've actually got to get back to their other job, and, or they're on a limited time for lunch break, etc. So we do interview early evening, early morning, etc. We'd rather see somebody at their best when they're completely relaxed and they can really be themselves.
Yeah, and I think there has to be flexibility from both sides. And actually, as a recruiter, I've experienced both. I've got clients who they will see me at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday, or they're not interested in the job, which for me doesn't really work. And I will push back as a recruiter. But quite a frustrating thing is for a candidate's side, because they'll tell you how much they want the job, etc., but then they won't free up any time and just say they can't interview for the next 2 weeks for no availability. So I guess what I'll give to advice I'll give to kind of job seekers at the moment is, if you're going to apply for jobs, make sure you've got the ability to attend interviews. You know, if it's a Monday to Friday business, then you need to have free time or be able to book a holiday or an afternoon off Monday to Friday, because they can't interview at weekends. I think, yeah, if you're going to enter the job searching mode, then definitely make sure you've got the resources. I mean, what's your experience on this one, Nate?
Me, same as you, to be honest. Will, like you say, we're not saying you've got to have, be fully flexible and be available whenever they say, but I think from both sides, you need to have, 3 dates that that you can give to the hiring manager, to the recruiter, whoever it is, to say, I can be available on these dates. That's a degree of flexibility that I think we're looking for. And then we can go to a client, if we go to a client and say they can only do, 2 p.m. next Thursday, it doesn't show a great deal of flexibility, which hiring managers are looking for, and that works both ways as well. Really, we'd expect a hiring manager to have a degree of flexibility as well. So, we do find from both sides, really, don't we? You can have inflexible people. Institutes, I think, are the type of places where we're interviewing on these days, and if they're not available,
Yeah, we get it. We have them wanting to interview an executive chef who's in contract catering Monday to Friday. Wants to interview at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday when they can't really, and we will push back. But yeah, and please don't book a holiday for 2 weeks just as you're applying for jobs, because it's the most infuriating thing when you get your interview and then you're off for 2 weeks. Obviously, probably not so much at the moment, but in normal times. So, and let's kind of touch on kind of in terms of constructive feedback. Yeah, how would you deliver it? Because I think, Graham, you just mentioned you'd feel more comfortable speaking to a recruiter to give constructive feedback. Am I kind of sensing that's, if there's some quite negative things?
I'd say it's definitely easier, and I suppose I've always been blessed with having built up quite close relationship with recruitment consultants. So we've worked together for many years, and that helped. But in terms of candidate feedback, certainly impressed when somebody asks. Certainly happy to provide detailed feedback on the process. And I think I would encourage everyone to ask and to push for it. It's such a learning experience, and I don't know, certainly for me in the past, when I've had feedback on interviews, it's normally been huge frustration that I've not perhaps got a point across that I'd like to have got across, or hadn't explained, or demonstrated transferable skills, or something that was absolutely within my gift, but it didn't come out in that 45-minute interview. So that feedback's gold, just in terms of your presentation, as much as why you didn't get the job, but also how you're going to approach the next interview differently. So,
and I don't think anyone ever walks out of an interview saying, I've absolutely nailed that 100%. Doesn't matter how well drilled you are at interviews, if it's your first, or you've done, hundreds in the past, or you interview numerous people, therefore you must be really good at interviewing. No one ever comes out having said, I've got every point across. So
no, that's fair. The interviews where you'd come out of All-Star knowing it probably didn't go well would be, and you mentioned about this before, about planning time, pre-interview. A big please from us is always make sure you've planned time to actually get to know and understand the product. We hate sitting down with people, and it happens at really senior levels where they've made a bit of a guessed assumption about what the business is. And that's very frustrating. That tends to shorten an interview quite a lot.
20 minutes is to an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, that preparation is so key, and I think we spoke about it on a previous webinar, that do your basics. There's so much out there. Speak to people, network within within the industry. If you know someone who's worked for that business, go and have a conversation with them. Go and grab them a coffee, and have a sit down. And I think we spoke about one of our guests last week, where there's nothing worse than someone just regurgitates your website at you. So maybe think about informative questions around the business that you can't find online. It's always good to find to prepare those questions at the end. Half of them will get answered, but that's always the way it kind of rolls, really. So
we actually we love feedback as well. If somebody's been around and had a look at the product and had an experience in one of our venues, tell us the truth. Just because it's an interview, we don't need to hear how wonderful we are and how perfect everything is, because you know, we're pretty self-aware that it's not always.
Yeah.
You know, give us some decent feedback on your experience, and obviously, you know, if you're coming in or looking to come in a role that could have an impact on guest experience, then you've already given yourself a bit of an interesting edge to somebody who's, as you say, just regurgitated the website at us.
Yeah, and a lot of it's always what we would recommend to clients, but a lot of our clients will be building a mystery guest stage into the interviews at the moment. Typically, usually high street restaurants will do it. So the second or third stage of the interview process for a GM or a regional will be go and visit this site and give us some honest feedback, constructive feedback, because everyone knows they're not perfect, you know. It's probably nice for them to have a free mystery guest as well. So
yeah, no, definitely.
Every restaurant can gear themselves up because the regional director or the CEO is on site, but it's a real mystery guest that gives them good feedback. So yeah, it's highly valuable. So if you were to go there, as you say, first or second, and show your initiative, go and do it. It's
and obviously, you know, I've certainly been here in my career. I'm sure, you know, many have, and this is unfortunately a time where there is a large proportion of redundancies taking place. But, you know, for the first time, for a lot of people, or, you know, certainly for an unplanned period of time, you know, we're pushing pause and really looking at what you want to do next, and going and really getting to know as much as you can about the product and the business. And, you know, you might find it's not for me, and God, I'm really glad I'm not going to go forward with that interview. And you know, we'd much rather people pull out than go through a process without really getting to understand, you know, the business they might be joining. So
I mean, we all forget interview process is a two-way street, isn't it? It's as much as for you as the applicant as the employer. Is this business right for me? It might do me short term, but am I going to love it? I can't remember the recruitment business. Who was it? Love Mondays. Was it Reed? Was it
Reed? Yeah, Alec Reed.
It's so true, isn't it? So a subject that everyone always skirts around, and I think it's probably a really good one to kind of get in here today, and how to conduct yourself in an interview, and it's that awkward question about salary, package, hours. How would you want someone to come across? Because it's a fine balance to be saying, I want to know what the offer is, because some people don't put salaries, etc., on adverts. But what stage of the interview process would it be acceptable to start discussing that?
For me, I think it depends on a lot of factors. You know, I think if you're going for a role that you're from the industry and you've done a similar role, you should have an idea of what the salary is going to be. So it shouldn't really be, you know, a key. It should never be a key focus of the interview. You know, it should, but at the same, so it should be left towards the end of the interview process. However, I'm sure from a hiring manager's point of view as well, you don't want to have your time wasted by interviewing somebody when there's a big gulf in terms of, you know, what the package is. From our point of view as recruiters, it helps because we have that detail. You know, we won't recommend somebody who, you know, isn't going to be right salary-wise. We'll have all the package details to, you know, the benefits. So the person going for that role is going to be right in terms of the salary and package and benefits. And similarly, if somebody is a little bit over budget, we can have that conversation before we get to interview stage. And because there is more budget every now and again, you know, that people advertise the price they want to pay, but for a superstar, they will pay more money, but we can have those conversations. A little bit more tricky when you go direct. But I think if you've done your homework about what salaries pay, you know, you should have a ballpark figure. So, you know, if you walk in there straight away and start talking money and you know, benefits, it's pretty much look at ground shaking head. It's going to turn them off, because it's more about, you know, the hiring manager wants to hear that you want to go work for their company, not what's in it for them, if that makes sense.
We all know those cheeky recruitment consultants add a few quid anyway to whatever the candidates told them.
It's called inflation, isn't it?
Inflation, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It would be housekeeping for us at the end of the first interview.
You would, yeah, it's good. But some don't, and that's and it's quite simple through a recruitment agency. But I highly recommend, you know, people go direct for roles. But you need to know, and it might not just be salary. It might be the amount of holidays, or what's the pension percentage, or something as easy as what's the shift pattern or the working hours. You know, can I do the school run in the morning? But I don't want to go into the interview and first off say, oh, can I get in at 9 instead of 8:30 because I need to do the school run? So,
yeah.
they're awkward questions, aren't they? So
I think sometimes, as the interview's going on, that's when you're starting to learn about the culture of the business. And I think you can learn quite quickly. When I came to join Talent Hive, from my initial interviews, I could tell they were a company that were going to be, that could be flexible. It came from conversation. I think you probably know during the interview whether or not it's going to be, those kind of questions are going to be, you're going to be able to ask those questions if you're not, going through. I interviewed at other agencies as well, and I knew straight away that what I was looking for wasn't going to be what they could offer me. So I think the first interview is, you kind of finding it out anyway as you go through that interview. So
I would put it in the, when you're doing your wrap-up interviews after your first stage, probably wouldn't be the first question I'd ask, but probably the second or third question if you've got questions around package, salary, etc. If it's not already been brought up, and I'll probably be polite about it and say, look, this isn't my driver, but what are your hours? What is your salary? What, etc. At least if you go into the second stage, you can make sure it's right and you've ticked all those boxes before. The first stage is typically culture fit, personality. Are you right for the business? Before the second stage, third stage, which is typically a little bit more detailed. So, what about references? Because what I find at the moment, well, no, it always has actually. Different companies will have different ways of doing things, but so. Coming back to our original theme of the day is how to conduct yourself. For me, have references ready to go, pre-warn people within the industry. From a personal experience, there's nothing worse than phoning up a referee for a candidate and the referee's questioning why they've given their name. So make sure you've got 3 people in your kind of, before you go for interview, who are willing to vouch for you, not because they were mates at work or you got on well or, you always had a good Friday night beer with them, but will they constructively be happy to vouch for you? Well, what about you, Graham? What's your thoughts around references and when do you kind of take those during the process?
No, that's fair. I think, we all try and be as efficient as we can in this process when we're hiring someone. So having referees ready to give references is really important. That makes total sense.
Yeah, especially to make a swift appointment as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about you? What's your experience of references, Aid?
Yeah, I agree. They need to be people that are going to have a bit of sway, when it comes to a hiring manager taking that reference. I've got people that go in, let's say, for example, I've got a front office manager that's giving me the head chef as a reference. That isn't a reference. It needs to be somebody that's, a decision maker, a key person within the business that the hiring manager is going to go to and say, okay, this person's got a bit of clout, I trust what they're saying. I think as well, LinkedIn recommendations is a new way of referencing. So use your LinkedIn to get recommendations, because I'm pretty confident. I mean, we do it. I'm sure, hiring managers will also go and check your LinkedIn, see who's recommending you. And also, people were doing background checks on you. Like Graham said earlier, it's a small industry. There's every chance that someone that you're going to interview for, somebody in that business will know somebody who will know somebody who will work with that person. And so making sure that you've got a squeaky clean pass. It all goes down to, leaving roles on good terms. All that sort of stuff will matter down the line. So making sure that you're professional throughout your career, I think, will help, because people will do, informal background checks through people that they know. So just be aware of that one.
Any decent clients of mine will start doing background checks from probably when they receive your CV. They won't do it to your current employer, but they'll know someone who knows someone within your organisation. And it happens all the time. They're not detailed references, but they'll just find out if you're a good egg or not. It's a terrible phrase, but the most common, if we were to do a kind of a discrete off the cuff reference, which isn't kind of formalised, the key question would be, would you re-employ this individual? Which kind of speaks volumes. You don't have to go into too much detail. So, what else do I want to touch on today? It was really about I'm going to come on to pet hates in a minute, but what about enthusiasm? Is there a balance to be had behind, how to conduct yourself through an interview? Levels of enthusiasm. For me, you can be too keen as well as, not enthusiastic enough. What's the right level we're looking for?
I think we're in a very interesting marketplace, and I think there's absolutely no shame in making sure that whoever's interviewing you knows the level of prep you've put in. and the level of interest that you hold. And I would agree with you, there's an appropriate way of demonstrating that and a way of not demonstrating that. But if you have, you know, had the opportunity to put a proposal forward for something, or put some suggestions forward about how they might change their business, or feedback, if you're, you know, if you've gone for a front of house role and you want to give detailed feedback on your experience and perhaps some adaptations to training or product or something, there's no harm in leaving that with the, you know, with the person who's interviewing you. You know, you might not be given airtime and an hour to present it, but you know, when you leave that room and you've left a nice, you know, a nice crisp document on the desk and gone, I hope you don't mind, I've taken a little bit of time to put something together.
Yeah.
You're already more memorable than the person that hasn't. So
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think if you're ramming down one particular point for an hour, that just shows, I think, the over keenness. I think that's a very subtle way to show how interested you are in a role. I think that's really good. I also think documentation is a good thing, just to sort of say, you know, there's something you'd have a look at a future date.
Yeah, exactly. You're not a time bandit. You appreciate they're busy, but you know, if you want to have a look at it later, and you know, you do like to think, you know, I've come out of interviews thinking, well, it would be nice if that person, you know, had that as a bit of train reading later, or they found it on their desk later and thought, oh, you know, he's taken the time to put that together. So yeah.
No, definitely. It's kind of standing out from the crowd, isn't it? It's been memorable, going above and beyond, which kind of is what hospitality is, isn't it? So show it during.
It's the market we're in, so I think you know, anything to show a point of difference to the other candidates in the queue is highly recommended.
Yeah,
I think if you get into a process with a company and you are then, you know, chasing and feedback or chasing next stage, and you're constantly doing this. When someone says we'll be in touch when we've got, you know, because sometimes things are delayed, people on holidays, etc., there can be delayed. I think when you're chasing stuff constantly, even though you may have been told, you know, there'll be when we'll get back to you, and you're chasing, I think that can then have a negative impact on the employer, thinking, well, you know, they're being quite needy at this stage. What are they going to be like to work with?
Exactly.
When you're maybe too over keen, when all actually you're doing is you want that job. But I think that can then, you've got to be careful that you're not showing them that you could be a little bit too needy if you're an employee for them. So if someone says they'll get back to you when they have more information, they will get back to you when they've got more information. They're not getting back to you because they haven't got any more information. So you've just got to bide your time a little bit in terms of, you know.
Yeah, of course. Every interaction you have with someone when you first met, you know, you're building up more of a picture, aren't you? So yeah, you're absolutely right.
And it's probably an extension to that, really. I think the slowest part of any process is usually that CV feedback, possibly because the hiring manager's looking to get all the CVs together in one go rather than kind of reviewing them in dribs and drabs. So there might be actually a cut-off date, so kind of respect if there is a closing date on the applications. You know, lots of companies are quite formal on that, and they'll just wait for that closing date. Then they'll sit down as a team and review the CVs they've got. So respect the closing date. What would the best approach be when chasing feedback on your CV? So when that closing date's kind of expired, what would the best follow-up be for you, Graham?
I think one follow-up is perfectly acceptable. I think ultimately, you know, it is out of a candidate's hands if the recruiter, the hiring manager, or the agency, or whoever it might be, doesn't come back to them within a timely manner. You know, first time, shame on you. Second time, shame on them. And that's unfortunate. And, you know, in the same way, Adrian spoke about, you know, building up an impression of a candidate that leaves you a voicemail every hour thinking, don't know whether I want them in the office, you know. The candidate would build an impression of the recruiter or the hiring manager that doesn't even bother to come back to them. So, yeah, I think, unfortunately, that's out of people's hands. I think that the one point I'd like to make about CVs is obviously that's a representation of you when you've not been able to bring it to life and give it, you know, that colour when you're in front of the hiring manager. So, gosh, pet hates for me, particularly if a CV is out of date, you know, where there's a lovely summary at the top that talks about this person's dream job being exec chef, and they've got, you know, head of operations, but 10 years ago they wanted to be a head chef, and they've just, you know, haven't bothered to tailor it to the job. I think, you know, again, we spoke about redundancies and the amount of people who are looking at changing their course and looking at a potentially new angle and a new job that's absolutely transferable in terms of their skill set and absolutely something that they can do. But remember, we're not geniuses when we're screening CVs. You know, you screen CVs and typically we'll look for similar roles and role titles that resonate with the role you're looking for. If you do have transferable skills and you have skills that absolutely meet the job spec, point that out to us. You know, we're not that clever. We need to be told, well, actually in this role I did this, which is absolutely, you know. And if a CV looks like it's been personalized for an application, that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it's already showing a bit more initiative. Just don't send the wrong one to the wrong person.
Shouldn't that? Yeah, and it's getting the dates wrong. So something's in past tense and something's in current tense, and it's
or writing to Hilton and telling them, you know, you've always dreamed of working for Marriott, or, you know, it's just
big no.
Yeah.
Any other pet hates, guys, that you've seen how people have kind of conducted themselves through an interview process?
Big one for me is when somebody gets to an offer stage and then they start making demands that have never been discussed at any point during the process. So I'm talking from a recruit for an agency. If somebody says to me, you know, if there's a role on for 35k and they, you know, from the outset say, look, I'm looking for 42, we know from the outset and we can have that conversation. But when, you know, you get somebody in the process for a role and we've talked about the salary, the package, you know, you've interviewed, and then at the end of it, they want an extra, you know, they want more money, they want this, they want that. That is a waste of everybody's time. Big pet hate. If someone, I don't mind it if they say at the start of the process, this is what I'm looking for, you know, you can rule them out, but when people are taking time to interview you, big pet hate of mine. You know, be clear from the outset what you're looking for, because as I was saying, you know, even going directly with clients, there might be more money. You know, if you are the right candidate and you are the exact, you know, fit culturally and you have the experience, they may think that you're worth an extra few thousand that you were asking for. But to do it at the end of the process, it leaves a bit of a sour taste, I think, for a lot of people. So.
What about you, Graham? Any more pet hates?
I think that's fair. I think obviously, you know, people should have a good sense, but don't always have a good sense as to what's going to happen when they, you know, gingerly knock on their current manager's door and slide that letter across the table and go, got some news, you know, and you know, counter offers do happen, and people, you know, current employers have woken up and gone, oh, actually, you know, we need to retain this person, we need to do something. So it happens, Adrian, but yeah, I
get counter offer, and it's harder to leave. I mean, it's a different world we're now, but you know, it's easier to stay where you are than to go somewhere new. You know, we know that.
I think I would advocate the reverse at the moment, in terms of people, you know, people are obviously keen to get back into work quickly if they have unfortunately been, you know, made redundant as a result of all this disruption. But, you know, start with being honest with yourself about what you're willing to take and what you're willing to look at and what's acceptable for a next role. And, you know, certainly as a recruiter, we would be heavily suspicious of anyone, you know, coming and saying, oh, I'd quite happily take a very large pay drop, you know, no problem at all, I'll do that. Appreciate the short-term need justifying work, but you know, ultimately that's not going to be a sustainable relationship. So yeah.
No, it's a good point. Yeah, the salary one's always a funny one. And counter offers do happen. And a question I always use when I'm representing the candidate during the screening process: have you thought about giving notice? As in the emotions and everything else. It's one of the top 3 most stressful things to do in your life is it get married, move home, and move jobs. So it's actually get yourself, when you start applying for jobs, you're in quite a good job with maybe some long years service, actually thinking about how am I going to give notice, what's the consequences of that, how's my boss going to react, etc. And just actually going through it in your head, because we'll go through a whole interview process. It's really exciting, and the applicant feels loved, and then they get a job offer. But then actually they think, oh, I've got to give notice now, and I get on well with the team, and I haven't finished a certain project, or we had a target, or is it the right time to move? And then suddenly, and that's probably my pet hate, isn't the salary or anything else. It's actually people haven't thought about the emotions of giving notice and what that means. So maybe think about that before you start applying for jobs, because it'll suddenly escalate and you've got a job offer, and there's a lot of, you know, valuable people who've invested time in you, and you need to be kind of prepared to see it through. But things happen, counter offers happen. It's not, counter offers aren't necessarily around the salary. It could just be the terms of your employment, as in your job description, or it might be, actually, we do love you, this is what we're going to offer you. It's not necessarily pennies in the pocket. So things can happen, but we're fully aware of those. Well, some really good points there, guys, and hopefully that'll help the everyone on to kind of benefit their job search and making sure they're doing everything right along the way they go and optimising the opportunities out there. So as always, we'll just move on to what the current job market's looking like at the moment. I might have a quick chat about contract catering, but Aidan, if you want to update us in terms of hotels, restaurants, bars, leisure, etc., and how we're looking.
We're still seeing a steady flow of roles come online on the various job boards. Sales roles seem to be coming back online, which, you know, it seems to have been hit the most within the hospitality, but we are seeing sales roles coming back online. There's still new openings coming up. I've seen the Jumeirah's reopening in London. They're looking for a full HOD team at the moment. So that's, you know, there's new jobs being created, which is therefore, you know, it's boosting the job market. So, and, you know, there's people that are taking those jobs from who are in employment. So, you know, it is creating a bit more buoyancy. We're aware that there's a few pilot events going on in the next couple of weeks in regards to events, some banqueting, some exhibitions taking place that the government are attending, and if all goes well, we're hearing that the 1st of October is when the green light will be given in terms of opening up the events sector a little bit more, which I think is what a lot of people are relying on, you know, within hospitality at the moment. I think when we see that, it's still going to take time to come back online, but when we're able to sell events, we're going to start needing those salespeople, you know, the revenue people to start maximising the profit. So it's still moving in the right direction. It's not, you know, moving quickly. We know that it's not going to until a vaccine, or, you know, it seems to. I don't think we're getting as many hospital admissions are we now, which is a good sign. I think it's the case going up, but it doesn't seem to have the same sort of effect on people, which is good. One thing I did want to touch on was, you know, there's a lot of people that have worked in hotels all their life, or one specific part of hospitality, and I think myself included. You know, I worked in hotels, and when I decided, you know, I don't want to do hotels anymore, what am I going to look at? I didn't really know about a lot of other sectors that like hospitality people. So, you know, there's a couple of sectors at the moment that I think are doing well despite everything that's going on, and they would be the retirement village sector. There's a lot now of retirement villages, not care homes, so later living complexes they're called, for sort of the over 50s, very, you know, you get high-end ones that have F&B on site, restaurants, leisure clubs. So they recruit, you know, people from hotels. They like those sorts of people. Similarly, student accommodation is a growing sector, and yes, there's a few issues with people getting into the country, you know, students coming back in, but, you know, from people we speak to, they're still doing very well in terms of occupancy levels. And again, they like people from the hospitality trade because they are still offering that level of service, you know, housekeeping, maintenance, front desk. Some of them have bars and stuff like that. So maybe if you're, you know, I've seen roles coming up, GM roles, you know, head chef, I've seen them come up. They may not be on your own. Maybe have a look at these different sectors if you're struggling to find the right one, because those sectors will look at people from hotels and, you know, and venues. So because we know, you know, it has been hit hard. So maybe have a look at that until something comes up, you know, in your area.
I would throw private hospitals into that mix as well, the likes of Bupa. You know, I was always really surprised. I did some consultancy for HCA for a while. The brigades of chefs, housekeeping, front of house, behind private healthcare is huge. You know, and of course it's all service industry driven, so hospitality candidates are perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my experience of that, I mean, it's probably not a sector at the moment, but when I came out of hotels and restaurants, I fell into recruitment. But if I'd known about sectors like contract catering, etc., I mean, I'm in the Midlands, so it's not as big, but, you know, there's so many kind of sectors within our sector you could look at rather than just looking at a hotel or restaurant, except they are coming back quite strong now. So
absolutely.
So as I just said, contract catering, which is a part of the sector I do lots of work in, is slowly coming back. Obviously healthcare and defence is remains stable, but education, obviously schools opened today. Yesterday was it? So yeah, slowly getting there regards to education. Obviously it's all a bit different, but they are recruiting. So it is a sector we've done lots within the last few weeks. The likes of B&I, kind of leisure, Stadia, we've still got a bit more time to go, unfortunately. Next couple of weeks will really give us a key indicator of what the B&I sector's going once these city centres get busier and people start going back to their offices. Now the kids are back in school, which is going to be a huge boost for a lot of sectors, not just B&I really. Obviously Stadia, etc. I think we had a test event at, was it Brighton and Chelsea the other day? I think it was about 2,500 people in a Stadia setting. So hopefully towards the end of the year we might see people back at rugby, football, etc. in probably limited capacity, but we could do with a bit of that at the moment. So yeah, but slowly getting there. So contract catering is pretty stable. And yeah, and if people haven't come across it, there's the food service circle which has been launched. I don't know if anyone's aware of that, from the contract catering sector. So that is pretty much nearly all the major players within contract catering, education, B&I, Stadia have joined forces to create a kind of a forum with jobs, etc., which is a great initiative. It's just shown how, I know, hospitality as a whole has really come together. So you've got probably 15, 20 major companies who compete day in, day out for contracts at the moment, all joining forces to try to help our industry. So if you haven't already seen it, foodservicecircle.com is the website. I think there's going to be some vacancies posted on there, as well as there's some great kind of Zoom chats and webinars with some key individuals within our industry. So well worth looking at if you're within the contract catering community or looking to move into that sector from other areas. So,
and of course, a sector that was in growth pre-COVID, and I touch wood when I say this, seems to be bouncing, certainly currently well, is experiential leisure. And I know you're about to say this, but the likes of All Star Lanes, Flight Club, Bounce, Putt Shack, etc. We're all such sociable animals, and we've all been locked up for a long period of time. So, people have been desperate to come out and do things.
Yeah.
We may have all become experts in how to cook in lockdown and how to do this, that, and the other in the house. But one thing you can't do is have an experience with friends and colleagues and get reunited again. So lots and lots and lots of opportunities, I would imagine, emerging as those businesses start to really take off towards Christmas.
Yeah, leisure as a whole. I mean, anyone in a seaside location at the moment.
Yeah.
Year on year up, some of our kind of more branded restaurant clients who've got those really key elements of absolutely flying. It's kind of Christmas weeks every week at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's not just because of the Eat Out scheme, and hopefully that'll continue through September. So they're busier than ever. You might even get seasonal contracts there. I don't think they'll commit to too many full-time contracts in those kind of seaside locations, but I envisage everyone's got pent-up demand to want to go out and have holidays. I think our holiday season in those areas will carry on throughout September and October, really, because you can't get a hotel room anywhere else at the moment.
No.
So,
yeah. And surprising lot of live-in positions as well in places like that. An awful lot of accommodation provided, which is great.
Yeah. It's not just Cornwall and Devon either. I think if you look at East Anglia or up in the lakes, there's plenty of jobs. So
Absolutely.
if you're without work and want a kind of short-term fix, I most certainly look at that kind of avenue. It's a good experience. I spoke to a candidate the other day who's quite senior within contract catering, and he's just gone for kind of a HOD level in a really nice hotel. And he asked me, I hope he doesn't mention me talking about it, so I won't mention his name or he's gone, but he gave me a call and asked me if it would be detrimental to his CV because he was quite a senior level candidate. I said, no, I think any employer who sees you do a 12-month stint at a Red Star, Michelin star hotel to keep yourself busy and probably earn half the salary of what you're earning, for me, it would show intent. And you probably, I think he was in hotels 20 years ago, so it's kind of back to the root stuff for him. And you'll learn new food trends, and it's not wasted time. There's no shame in it. So I'd highly recommend, if you do see any of those kind of interim roles out there, go for it. It keeps yourself busy, you're going to learn. Every business is different. There's always new skills and experiences to pick up. So I'll definitely go for it. So just a few questions we've had come through, and I'll just fire through these, just go as we go, actually. So someone just posted, if I do visit a site and I find it's not for me, should I feed that back to the company? And I'd probably add to that, how would you feed it back to the company? What's a good way of doing it?
I think it's fine.
Yeah, I'd be grateful of the feedback. You know, if we're putting off candidates because of something we're doing or not doing, or then of course we'd want to know about that.
Yeah. Honesty is
But
best
something
policy.
that's not actually meant to be happening, and highlighting it, you know, can fix a need that shouldn't be happening anyway. So it's
Definitely. There's a gentleman, and I forget his name unfortunately, but there was a gentleman, very, very clever gentleman, who stayed in a top London hotel. I'll keep it anonymous. The company I worked for, who upon checkout, stayed overnight, and upon checkout asked to see somebody senior within the hotel, presented a list of feedback and said, look, I hope you don't mind, but you know, I have a hotel background myself. Here's a very detailed list of, you know, what was not right with my stay and, you know, elements that were missed. It led to a very successful relationship whereby the hotel company in question invested in what's known as the GAP report, which has become an industry standard in terms of mystery guests within hotels and how hotels are rated. And a huge element of it has been used by the AA when they've gone to star rate properties. This all began with feedback from a guest saying, I'd like to just, you know, give you some detailed feedback.
Yeah, I think I will welcome it really, as long as you put, as long as it's presented in the right way, with a bit of honesty in there. Absolutely.
definitely better than just no showing for your interview.
Or just cancelling. Just it's not for me. Probably get a bit more depth.
Definitely.
Because clients, and I actually had a call with a client this morning who's questioning why aren't we getting candidates for this one role we're recruiting. We kind of went through a list of what it could be and the feedback, and I think it could be salary, it could be location, it could be, you know, the reputation of the business. I think it's best to be honest, and there's certain things we can tweak and certain things we can't, but at least they get a reason why they're not attracting candidates to their role, and they can adjust things accordingly if it's possible.
100%.
So someone's just asked why, sorry, my last two companies only provided professional references. Does this matter? And do I need more personal ones? Which is, it's been a running theme for the last 5 years now, isn't it? No one ever gives a reference.
Well, we're in a culture where everyone's extremely paranoid at all times of being sued. So less is more. And yes, I mean, it is standard process amongst certainly most organizations I know. Their policy is, you know, very much confirmation of dates and confirmation of role.
Yeah.
I think that's where Adrian's suggestion came in, you know, personal recommendations, LinkedIn recommendations, etc. Give a bit more color and a bit more flavor as to, you know, why you're such a superstar. But I don't think, you know, certainly from experience, employers are not put off by standard references because it's you know, it's what you get these days, you know.
I've had a client complain that they can only get standard references, but that was also their own policy.
Exactly.
It's a funny old world we're in. It really is.
Yeah.
I think at the moment, you know, if you say if you want to stand out, then you'll have people that you've worked with. You know, I've had GMs or HR managers that I've worked with in the past that would give me a reference aside from the company one. So, you know, if you want to stand out at the moment and get those and get them in advance, you know, if you're going to an interview, if you can provide them, you know, it means that they haven't got to be a chase. You know, they're seeing straight away, you know, your character. So there's no harm in getting it. But you know, if you're the right candidate for them, it's not going to matter if, you know, you've only got a professional reference.
And make sure, go on.
Sorry, no, after you, Graham.
No, I was just going to say, just make sure you've, however you've got it across, make sure that the interviewer, the recruiter knows what you achieved while you were there. You know, make sure that's really crystal clear, because that speaks as highly as a reference. You know, any sort of recognition, any external recognition, you know, any external formal qualifications, or maybe you were the one that had the, you know, the AA auditor come in and you know, you got that hotel the extra star, or you got the award for this, that and the other. You know, that's as good as a reference.
Yeah, it could be employee of the year, it could be, key wins, I converted X piece of business if you're in sales, or
Absolutely.
it could be I managed the property during COVID and and dealt with all the issues that came along.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think we touched on it last week or the week before. I think it was last week actually, where it's great saying we as a team did something, but it's okay. It might have been a team of 10 or 100 people who achieved a Michelin star or an X rating, but actually, if it was you who actually made an impact on a business, make sure they know about it. Don't presume they know about it either.
Yeah.
That's what can happen. Another question that's come in: what if I don't agree with the feedback I received? Am I able to challenge it?
Depends on I think if you know, I know you mentioned culture fit earlier. If they say it's culture fit, there's not a lot really that you can challenge on it. You know, it's a person. It's a two-way street. You know, if they don't feel they can work with you, they don't feel they can work with you, and there's not a lot you can do about it. If they say you haven't got X, Y, or Z, but you can demonstrate you have, then I wouldn't. Challenge is probably the wrong word. Highlight might be a better word to, you know, highlight maybe they've missed that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't ever suggest challenging. Challenging sounds quite aggressive. You know, I would never go and, you know, aggressively say you're wrong, because we always say it's a small industry. You know, there might be other jobs in the future, but I'm sure if it's something that you can physically highlight that maybe they've missed, I don't see the harm in highlighting it in the right way.
Yeah, and if the feedback is, you know, oh, we didn't feel this candidate had this particular experience or this particular skill set, then, you know, potentially that you didn't get that across, and how are you going to make sure you get that across in future interviews? So it's still a learning, even if you disagree, because obviously it didn't resonate with the person you were hiring. Or if you went through a recruitment company, then it's their fault. So
it's always their fault. Yeah, I think I'd kind of extend on that really. Yeah, if there's a certain point that they say you didn't have the strength in or the experience in, but you have, I think there's a constructive way of feeding that back, be it direct or via a recruitment agency. Just a polite follow-up email, perhaps, just saying, this, I understand this is a feedback. This is what I have done, but I fully respect your decision. And it might sway them. Usually won't, but yeah, it can do. And just touching on actually what we just talked about, references. Then I think, yeah, getting good references can really kind of escalate you up the pack as well if you've got, you know, testimonies, etc. So you might have been just in the running, and it could take you to like the #1 preferred candidate if there's good references going on. Just scanning through. I've got a really good one actually. Probably a question we'll finish on because it can resonate with quite a lot of people on this. If you're genuinely nervous in interviews, should you express this, and how I present myself in interviews, if it's not a true reflection of how confident I am in my role? So yeah, what about? And there will be a lot of people out there. Not many people are natural interviewers. So yeah, how would you deal with that? Is that something you should front up and tell people you're meeting, or how would you deal with it?
I think I would definitely think about what I want to get across in that interview, and if I'm aware that I'm likely to clam up or not be able to express myself as well as I'd like to because of nerves, then look at alternative tools, such as, you know, we touched on before. Perhaps you've prepared some written information or a written document, or, you know, you've made sure that you've got information to hand that you can refer to. So if you clam up, you can very quickly talk about something you're comfortable in. Practice. You know, I mean, the more time you spend, and that's why, you know, whilst it's terribly upsetting when you don't get feedback, you know, we talked just before we went on about still waiting for feedback 4.5 years later from certain lady. Every interview experience is good experience, and I've found recruitment agents to be excellent, to be, you know, the prep before interviews. You know, they're really a great resource in terms of getting you ready for going in front of clients. But yeah, if you're self-aware that you're likely to be nervous, then think about how you can combat it. You know, and it might be that you need to have a good scream, or have a good, you know, walk around the block before the interview. You know, don't go in smelling of 20 fags, you know, but you know, do whatever you need to do. to get those nerves under control and have, as I say, for me, I would have things to hand that would be an aid memoir if I lost my train of thought, or, you know, wanted to make a particular point and worried that maybe nerves would stop me doing that.
I think there's, and I've always, what I used to when I interview, taking a pad, and you can have some kind of prompts for yourself, make it as comfortable. At the end of the day, an interview is to make the best representation of yourself. It's not a test. They just want to get to know you and see what you could add to their business.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with taking a notepad, and you might actually use it for taking notes, but also have some scripted questions in there. I think I'd rather hear the scripted questions than you just clam up and say nothing at the end or during the interview. I think, yeah, don't be afraid to do that. It would be fine by me anyway, that's for sure.
Yeah, same.
Cool. Okay. Lovely. Well, I think we've definitely had some value there today, guys. There's been good points and some, different ways of doing things, but I think we all kind of come to the same conclusion around what good looks like. So I really appreciate your time. So let me just pop that up. Sorry, I'll get better at this, I think, by the 8th webinar we do. So yeah, big thanks for today. So next week we are going to go into a bit more detail around second and third stage interviews. As we kind of touched on today, the initial interview is really about getting to know you, culture fit, making sure you know the business you're interviewing. But then we're going to start talking about next week, second and third interviews, or even beyond that, where we start talking about typical assessment days you could attend, or it might be, as we say, mystery guest interviews, or it might be the horrible thing of big presentations and everything else, and preparing for that and what good looks like. So we've got a couple of really good guests for that. I think I forgot to mention actually earlier, we have recorded this. So if you had to kind of dash out, which I should have probably said earlier, or you found it quite informative and you want to pass it on to someone you know, then please do so. We will probably be uploaded to the website within a couple of hours of finishing today. So it leaves me to thank Adrian and Graham for joining us today and sparing some very valuable time. And yeah, I hope you'll all join us soon on next week's webinar, which is, as always, 1 o'clock on a Wednesday. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.